After I turned down a VP's dinner invite, he called me uptight in a team chat and got me blacklisted. So I collected every message and quietly joined a growing class action lawsuit. When their lawyer called me to testify, he went completely pale. The moment I turned down that dinner invite, I didn't realize I was basically signing my own career death warrant. It started with a message from our senior VP, Mark, in the team Slack. It was 9:17 p.m. Way past hours, and he wrote, "Dinner tomorrow, 7:30. Everyone important will be there. You should join us, my name. Could help your visibility." That winking emoji still makes my skin crawl. I replied politely, said I had prior plans and maybe next time. He reacted with a single thumbs-up emoji, thought nothing of it. The next day, everything felt off. My coworkers were weirdly quiet, and I noticed I wasn't on the invite for a major pitch review I'd been working on for weeks. Later that afternoon, someone accidentally forwarded a message thread Mark had written. "Guess my name is too uptight to network, maybe not leadership material after all." And he sent it in a public team chat. Half the company saw it. I froze. I didn't know what to do. HR brushed it off, said he's old school, and told me to focus on my work. Within 2 weeks, my projects were reassigned. I was quietly moved to a dead-end role doing administrative reports. When I asked my manager about it, she said, "This is just how the industry works. Don't take it personally." I started saving everything after that, every message, every voice note, every friendly comment that made my skin crawl. I organized them all, screenshots, timestamps, metadata, and stored them in a password-protected drive, just in case. Months later, a rumor started spreading through ex-employees about a class action lawsuit forming against the company for gender discrimination and retaliation. I didn't think much of it until I saw his name listed in one of the public filings. That's when I decided I wasn't just going to survive this, I was going to bury him with his own words. So I took my entire archive, every disgusting, dismissive, power-hungry thing he'd ever said, and sealed it in a digital affidavit with a timestamp verification. Then, quietly, I sent it to the lawyers leading the case. 3 weeks later, I got a call. When the attorney said, "We'd like you to testify," I could almost hear the blood drain from Mark's face across the office the next day. He turned pale as paper when our eyes met in the hallway, and that's when I realized he knew exactly what I'd done. But he had no idea just how deep my evidence went. When I joined the company, I thought I'd finally made it. It was a big marketing firm in Chicago, glass offices, espresso machines, and fake smiles. Everyone wanted to be there because it was a stepping stone to the top. That's what they told me during onboarding. I was 28, ambitious, and honestly, a little naive. I thought hard work and good results would speak louder than office politics. My first year, I killed it. I landed 2 national accounts, one with a major hotel chain and another with a beverage brand that doubled our quarterly revenue. Mark, the senior VP, even congratulated me in front of the entire floor, said I had grit and polish. At the time, I took it as a compliment, but looking back, I should have paid attention to the way he said it. The longer I stayed, the clearer it became. Success there wasn't about skill. It was about who you drank with, who you flattered, and who you were willing to overlook. Mark was the gatekeeper to all of it. He was charming in that fake executive way, a smile that never reached his eyes, always touching people's shoulders when he talked to them, using sweetheart with the interns like it was harmless. HR adored him. The board thought he was untouchable, and everyone knew what dinner invitations from him meant. It was an open secret, unspoken, but understood. He'd take someone promising out to dinner, usually alone, then suddenly their name would start appearing in important projects, promotions, and private meetings. It was gross, but people played along because refusing him meant you'd be sidelined. I kept my head down and did my job. I didn't go out for drinks. I didn't flirt. I just worked hard. That's probably why the team started calling me the robot behind my back. Then came the big pitch, the one I'd poured 3 months of my life into. Late nights, weekends, constant revisions. It was supposed to be my breakout moment. And then, just days before the presentation, I was removed from the project to allow more senior collaboration. You guessed it, the replacement was someone who'd recently been on one of Mark's mentorship dinners. That's when it started hitting me. This wasn't bad luck or office politics. It was a pattern. A rigged system built on intimidation, coercion, and silent compliance. I thought about quitting. I even drafted a resignation letter one night after a 12-hour shift. But something in me snapped when I reread that Slack message calling me uptight. He didn't just sideline me, he mocked me for not playing his game. So I stayed, and I watched, carefully. I collected every small injustice like evidence, because I had a gut feeling one day I'd need proof. I didn't realize just how right I was until an ex-employee, an old mentor of mine named Clara, texted me one night out of the blue. "You still at North Point? There's a lawsuit starting. You might want to talk to the lawyers, it's about Mark." That single message changed everything. After Clara's message, something in me shifted. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was preparing. I started acting like everything was normal, even though I was documenting every single move. Every meeting with Mark. Every offhand comment he made to women on the team. Every time someone got promoted after a mentorship dinner. I kept a second phone hidden in my bag, one with a voice recorder app running whenever I was in meetings with him or anyone from leadership. I even started forwarding messages to a private encrypted email address I'd set up under a fake name. You could call it paranoia. I called it insurance. Mark must have sensed something was off because he started being weirdly nice, asking me if I was settling in, complimenting my loyalty, trying to test if I'd soften up. I played along, nodding, smiling, pretending to be the quiet, grateful employee again. Behind the scenes, the company was shifting. People were leaving quietly, strategically. Some left for better opportunities, but rumors said they'd been paid to sign NDAs. One woman from HR stopped showing up entirely. No one said why. Then one Friday afternoon, I saw something that nearly made me drop my coffee. Mark was in the conference room with a woman I didn't recognize, late 20s, probably new. The blinds were drawn, but from where I stood, I could see their reflections in the glass. He was standing too close. His hand was on her back. She looked uncomfortable. After that day, she disappeared from the office completely. No goodbye email. No mention in the next staff meeting. Just gone. That night, I went through my archive. I had hundreds of files by then. Screenshots of Slack messages, calendar invites, inappropriate jokes he sent in group chats, even one voice note where he said, "You've got to know how to keep people grateful." The disgust I felt reading all of it burned away my fear. I started reaching out quietly to some of the people who'd left. A few were hesitant to talk, but once I mentioned Clara's name, they opened up. It turned out they'd all been pushed out for the same reason, turning him down. One woman told me he'd called her a liability in a board meeting after she refused a second dinner. Another said she'd been demoted after reporting him to HR. Every single story matched the same pattern, retaliation disguised as corporate restructuring. That's when I realized I wasn't the only one gathering proof. There were others, and together, we had enough to burn the whole thing down. So I started planning. I organized all the data into a master file with timestamps, attachments, metadata, everything verifiable. I even included emails from HR showing they'd ignored complaints. But I wasn't going to blow it up yet. Not until I knew the timing was right. Because when it came time to strike, I wanted there to be no way out. A few weeks later, things started unraveling faster than I expected. It began with an internal memo, a vague ethics audit supposedly reviewing leadership practices. Mark laughed it off in a meeting, called it just another HR stunt. But I noticed something in his face when he said it, that flicker of fear he couldn't hide. Then I got an email. It was from an encrypted account. No name, no signature, just, "You don't know me, but I know what you've been collecting. Don't stop. You're not the only one." Attached was a single document, a scanned copy of a legal filing draft. It listed 6 plaintiffs. 5 were names I recognized from ex-employees. But the 6th, it was someone still working at the company. That same afternoon, Clara confirmed it. "There's a whistleblower still on the inside," she said over the phone. "She's been feeding evidence directly to the lawyers. They just need one more piece to nail him, proof of retaliation." I knew exactly what she meant. My demotion, my reassignments, the public humiliation, all of it documented. But I also realized something worse. If there was an internal investigation, Mark would start hunting for the leak. And if he got even a hint that I was involved, I'd be done before I could testify. So I doubled down on the act, smiles, compliance, agreeing with his every word. He started trusting me again, even invited me back into a small client meeting to see how I handled the heat. He thought he was testing my loyalty, but I was testing his arrogance. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. The whistleblower, it wasn't some quiet analyst or assistant like I'd assumed. It was my manager, the same woman who told me, "This is just how the industry works." Her name was Lena. When she found out I'd been documenting everything, she asked me to meet her at a diner near the office, low-key, no company cars nearby. She came straight out with it. "I was wrong to tell you that," she said, her voice shaking. "He did the same thing to me years ago. I stayed silent because I thought I could survive it if I played along. But it doesn't stop. It never stops." That hit me hard. I'd spent months resenting her for enabling him. Turns out she was part of the silent chain, the ones who were too scared, too cornered to fight back. But she wasn't silent anymore. Lena showed me part of her file, screenshots, testimony drafts, internal reports she'd smuggled out before it could wipe them. She was working directly with the legal team behind the class action case, feeding them real-time updates from the inside. And she had a proposition. "If you give me your archive," she said, "we can make sure it's submitted officially before he buries everything. He's already destroying data. You have what they need." That night, I copied everything onto a hard drive, sealed it with encryption, and handed it to her in a plain white envelope at that same diner. She thanked me quietly, then added something that stuck with me. "He thinks we're afraid of him. Let's prove him right, until the day we don't have to be." That was the last time I saw Lena in person, because 3 days later she vanished. No notice, no goodbye email. Her office was cleared out overnight. And the next morning, Mark called an emergency team alignment meeting. His first words were, "We're cleaning house." The team alignment meeting was just code for a purge. By the time it ended, 4 people were restructured out. Their names were gone from the directory by noon. I kept my head down, heart racing. Lena's name wasn't even mentioned. No farewell, no explanation, just erased. It was obvious he'd found her out, or at least suspected. That's when I realized something brutal. If Lena had my archive, and she disappeared before handing it over, then everything I'd built could be gone too. But I didn't panic. I'd planned for that. Every time I'd updated my archive, I'd synced it to a private cloud folder with auto backup and encrypted links. And because I'm the kind of person who triple-checks everything, I had a second copy stored offline in my apartment, hidden in a box labeled tax records. Still, the air in the office changed. People whispered in hallways, avoided eye contact. Mark strutted around more than usual, like he'd just survived a near hit. He even sent an all-staff email thanking everyone for their continued professionalism during this transitional period. I wanted to throw up. But instead, I smiled at him in the hallway, told him, "Great meeting today, Mark." He grinned, said, "Glad you're still here, kid. Knew you had backbone." That was the last compliment he ever gave me. That night, I started my own quiet war. I printed hard copies of every message thread, every file. I created a digital timeline linking each piece of evidence to specific retaliatory acts. Demotions, HR complaints, resignations. I built it like a story, a narrative they couldn't twist. Then I started planting breadcrumbs. Small, harmless-looking hints in shared drives, project files renamed to look like old versions, with subtle metadata links to key messages. If Mark or it tried to scrub the system, they'd leave a digital trail showing exactly what they deleted. Next, I reached out to Clara again, told her Lena had vanished. She paused, then said, "You need to get your version into the lawyer's hands directly. No middlemen, no internal channels." So I asked for the attorney's contact info, called him from a prepaid phone, and told him I had documentation that could prove systemic retaliation and misconduct at the VP level. He didn't even hesitate. "Bring it, and don't send anything electronic yet. Physical only." So I spent all weekend prepping a binder, every exhibit labeled, indexed, backed by metadata screenshots. When I finally handed it off to the firm's investigator, he flipped through it, then looked at me and said, "You realize this could end his career?" I said, "Good, because he ended too many others." For the next 2 weeks, I waited, pretending everything was fine, showing up, smiling, doing busy work. But Mark must have sensed something again because he called me into his office one morning. "Shut the door." He leaned back, gave that fake smile, and said, "I hear you've been talking to some old employees. That true?" My stomach dropped. But I kept my face blank. "Just catching up," I said. He smirked. "Careful who you talk to. People who cross the wrong line don't last long here." That was the moment I knew the game was over, but not for me, for him. Because I had no idea that, even as he was threatening me, something massive was already in motion behind the scenes. 2 weeks later, I got an email from the law firm's investigator, short, direct. "We need to meet in person. Urgent." We met in a small cafe near Union Station. He looked tired, wired, like he hadn't slept. When he sat down, he slid a thin folder toward me and said, "You didn't just document retaliation. You documented a cover-up." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He opened the folder. Inside were copies of my own screenshots, but with internal audit stamps, security clearance codes, and signatures from the company's compliance department. Documents I had never seen before. "They were already reviewing him," he said quietly, "months before the class action started." Apparently, North Point's legal department had been running an internal risk review, a silent one, because Mark had racked up multiple HR complaints over the years that were buried under informal resolution files. They'd created a confidential dossier on him labeled Employee Relations, Executive Conduct. And get this, they'd hired an external firm to monitor employee communications, supposedly for data security. But really, it was to track who might leak. That's when the twist hit me like a punch. They already knew someone was collecting evidence me. But instead of stopping me, someone inside the compliance team had been quietly copying my files from the company servers and adding them to their secret audit. It meant my evidence wasn't just mine anymore, it was already logged in their system, stamped, dated, and verified by corporate channels. Untouchable. I asked, "Who did this? Who inside the company?" The investigator shook his head. "Can't tell you that yet, but they left a note in the file, just one line." He handed it over. In neat, typed text it said, "Protect her work, she's doing what we couldn't." I just stared at it. My hands were shaking. Someone on the inside, maybe someone still under Mark's control, had been quietly helping me all along. The investigator leaned in and said, "They can't bury this now. Your documents match our subpoenaed communications exactly. Once we file, it's open season." For the first time in a long time, I felt something close to relief, but it didn't last long. The next day, I got called into HR. The tone was clipped, professional. "We're restructuring again," they said. "Your position's being eliminated effective immediately." I laughed, couldn't help it. "Of course it is," I said. They handed me a severance offer and an NDA thicker than a novel. I didn't sign a thing. I packed up my desk, left my badge on the keyboard, and walked out. I was halfway home when I got a call, an unknown number. "Keep your phone on," the investigator said. "We're filing the motion tonight. It'll hit the press by morning." He wasn't exaggerating. By 9 a.m. the next day, my phone exploded with notifications. LinkedIn, Reddit, industry blogs. Headline, "Senior VP at North Point Marketing under investigation for retaliation and misconduct. Class action expands to include new evidence from current employees." And in the article, there it was, a quote from the filing. "Documented evidence shows deliberate retaliation against an employee following refusal of inappropriate invitations." They didn't name me, but everyone in that building knew exactly who they were talking about. By noon, the company went into full lockdown mode. Emails disabled, meetings canceled, Mark's office door locked, but the wildest part, he wasn't fired, not yet. He disappeared. Security said he took personal leave. But the truth was, he'd fled. He knew what was coming, and I wasn't done. Because I still hadn't told anyone about the one piece of evidence I hadn't turned in, the one voicemail he left me late one night, drunk and sloppy, saying words that would finish him off completely. That voicemail had haunted me for months. It wasn't just the words, it was the tone, the slur in his voice, the smug confidence, the sense that he'd done this 100 times before and didn't fear a single consequence. The message started casual. "Hey, just checking if you got my invite. You really should say yes to these things, it's how people move up around here." Then his voice dropped lower. "You know how many careers I've built, how many I've ended. Half these people would be nothing without me. They don't even realize I'm protecting them from worse." That line, "protecting them from worse," stuck with me. I replayed it over and over, trying to understand what he meant. The answer came a week later when the investigator called again. "We've got Mark's internal communications from the subpoena," he said. "You're going to want to see this." He wasn't wrong. They'd uncovered entire email threads between Mark and two board members, one of whom had quietly retired months before everything exploded. The messages spelled out exactly what Mark had been doing for years. He wasn't just coercing women into mentorship dinners. He was handpicking which ones to advance and which ones to bury in exchange for silence. In one email, he literally wrote, "If they stay grateful, we promote them. If they get moral about it, we isolate them. Keeps the culture clean." That word, clean, made my stomach turn. And worse, the board knew. They'd been covering for him because he was good for business. Every complaint against him was settled quietly, every incident recategorized as performance misalignment or team conflict. So when HR told me this is just how the industry works, it wasn't apathy, it was policy. He'd been doing this for over a decade, rotating through employees, targeting those ambitious enough to rise but too afraid to fight back. Every person who pushed back was labeled difficult, emotional, uncooperative. I wasn't the first. I was just the first who didn't give up. The more I read, the sicker I felt. It wasn't about lust or ego for him, it was control. He wanted to play God to decide who succeeded and who vanished. In one of his private messages to the retired board member, he even bragged, "The best part, they still thank me when I fire them." That was the moment I stopped seeing him as a creep or a bully. He was something darker, someone who enjoyed destroying people's confidence and calling it mentorship. When the investigator asked if I wanted to add anything before the trial date, I told him yes. I sent him the voicemail, the original, unedited recording with date and metadata intact. Because those words weren't just a threat. They were a confession. And once they became public evidence, they wouldn't just ruin his career, they'd expose every executive who'd helped protect him. The investigator said, "You realize this could take down half the board." I said, "Then it's finally big enough." The night before the first court hearing, I sat alone in my apartment listening to that voicemail one last time. His voice, that fake warmth, it didn't scare me anymore. It disgusted me, and I knew exactly how I'd finish this. The first hearing was public. Cameras outside, reporters lined up, flashes going off every time someone in a suit walked through the doors. I didn't say a word to anyone. I just took my seat in the back row and watched as Mark, the man who once called me uptight in front of my entire team, walked in looking 10 years older. No swagger left, no smile. Just that pale, cornered look of someone who'd finally realized he wasn't untouchable. The lawyers played the voicemail on the record. His voice filled the courtroom, casual, arrogant, slurring through that line. "You know how many careers I've built, how many I've ended." The sound alone was enough to make every reporter's pen stop moving. Then they pulled up the emails, the chat logs, the internal memos, the retaliation notes. Piece by piece, they built the story I'd lived through, the dinner invitation, the public humiliation, the demotion, the whisper campaigns. My name wasn't said aloud, but when the attorney referenced Employee 14, his eyes met mine for just a second. He knew, by the second day of testimony, Mark's legal team was scrambling. His attorney tried to argue the messages were taken out of context. The judge shut him down fast. The digital forensics, timestamps, and metadata left no room for denial. Every joke, every veiled threat, every deliberate act of retaliation, verified, printed, undeniable. Within a week, the company folded. They settled the class action for 7 figures. The board fired half its senior leadership. HR restructured under new management. And Mark, he didn't just lose his job, he lost his entire career. Word spread fast in the industry, no one would touch him. His LinkedIn vanished. His consulting firm website went dark. By the time the settlement hit the news, he was done. A few months later, the industry magazine that once featured him as a visionary leader published an exposé titled "The Culture of Fear at North Point." The cover photo was the company's empty glass office, lights off, desks abandoned. I kept reading it over and over, waiting to feel proud. Instead, I just felt empty. It's weird how revenge doesn't feel like victory. It feels like relief that you survived long enough to see the truth finally matter. After the case ended, I moved out of Chicago. Got a new job at a smaller firm in Seattle. No glass offices, no fake smiles, just people who do their work and go home. Every once in a while, I still get messages from people who left North Point. They tell me thank you, that because of my evidence, the industry's starting to talk about what professional culture really means. I don't reply to most of them, but one day I got an anonymous email, no subject line, just a single sentence. You finished what Lena started. I sat there staring at it for a long time. Then I opened my encrypted drive and deleted every single file. All the messages, the screenshots, the recordings gone, because they'd done their job. And now so had I. I took a walk that night, breathing cold air, thinking about everything I'd lost and everything I'd rebuilt. People always say success is the best revenge. But they're wrong. It's peace. And peace feels like walking away while the fire burns behind you, knowing you'll never have to look back.